Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we drift into a city that floats and leans and breathes quietly in the half-light of morning. You stand at the edge of a canal in Amsterdam in the 1600s, where the water holds the sky like a dim mirror, and the buildings seem to rise straight out of it. The air is cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of peat smoke, wet wood, and something slightly sour that you cannot quite place. A bell begins to ring somewhere in the distance, slow and steady, and you realise this is a place that measures time in echoes across water. You probably will not survive this city very comfortably, at least not by modern standards. The canals are not exactly clean, the streets are narrow, and the comforts you take for granted are still waiting to be invented. But for now, you are here, and the city is waking around you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to share where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. It is always nice to know where these quiet journeys are reaching. Now dim the lights and let yourself settle into the slow rhythm of this place. You stand still for a moment longer, letting your eyes adjust to the soft grey light. The canal beside you is calm, broken only by the gentle ripple of a passing boat somewhere out of sight. A duck glides across the surface, leaving a thin line behind it, as if it is quietly writing something that will disappear within seconds. A well-established historical observation notes that Amsterdam in the 17th century was one of the wealthiest cities in the world, at the heart of a vast trading network that stretched from the Baltic to Asia. Yet in this early hour, none of that wealth feels loud or overwhelming. It rests quietly in the brick walls, in the timber beams, in the stillness before the day begins. You take a slow breath. The air is colder than you expected, and it carries a layered smell. There is fresh bread somewhere nearby, warm and comforting. There is also the sharpest scent of fish, and beneath it the earthy note of canal water that's been sitting for longer than anyone would like to admit. It is not unpleasant exactly, just honest. Your feet rest on a narrow strip of worn stone. The edges are uneven, shaped by years of footsteps, carts, and the constant settling of the ground beneath. This entire city stands on soft soil supported by thousands of wooden piles driven deep into the earth. Some say that if you listen closely, you can almost imagine the city gently shifting, adjusting itself with every passing season. You begin to walk. The sound of your steps feels different here, softer somehow. The narrowness of the street absorbs the noise, while the water beside you reflects it back in a faint echo. Each movement feels contained, as if the city is holding you within its lines. A small boat passes slowly along the canal, guided by a man who barely seems to move. He stands at the stern, pushing with a long pole, his expression calm and focused. The boat carries barrels, their wooden sides darkened by moisture. You watch as he glides past the water, parting gently, then closing again behind him. Some accounts from the period suggest that much of Amsterdam's daily transport relied on these quiet waterways rather than the streets. It makes sense. The canals are everywhere, threading through the city like veins, carrying goods, people, and stories from one place to another. You cross a small wooden bridge. It arches slightly, just enough to let boats pass beneath. And as you step onto it, you pause for a moment at the top. From here, you can see farther down the canal. The buildings line both sides tall and narrow, their facades leaning just a little, as if they are curious about what is happening below. There is a curious detail that often surprises people. Many of these houses are so narrow because property taxes were once based on the width of the frontage. So people built upward instead of outward, creating these tall, thin structures that feel almost improbable. You look at them now and wonder what it must be like inside, how the rooms are arranged, how the light moves from floor to floor, how many lives are stacked within such slender walls. A window opens somewhere above you. A woman leans out, shaking a cloth with a practiced motion. Dust catches the morning light for a moment before drifting down toward the canal. She does not notice you, or if she does, she gives no sign. The city is used to movement, to strangers, to the constant flow of people passing through. You continue walking, leaving the bridge behind. The street narrows further, turning slightly, guiding you deeper into the city. The light shifts as you move, sometimes brightening where the sky opens above, sometimes dimming, where the buildings lean closer together. You can hear more sounds now. A door creaks. A voice calls softly. Somewhere a cart rolls over the stone, its wheels producing a low, steady rhythm. Historians still argue whether the rapid growth of Amsterdam during this period felt orderly or chaotic to those who lived through it. As you walk, it feels like a bit of both. There is a structure to everything, an underlying plan, yet there is also a sense of constant adjustment, as if the city is still deciding what it wants to become. You pass a doorway where a faint glow spills out onto the street. Inside, someone is already awake, moving about with quiet purpose. You catch a glimpse of a table, a chair, the edge of a hearth. The smell of something cooking drifts out warm and inviting. It reminds you that behind each of these narrow facades is an entire world unfolding in parallel with yours. Your hand brushes lightly against the wall as you walk. The brick is cool and slightly damp, textured in a way that feels grounding. It anchors you to this place, to this moment. You are not just observing anymore. You are part of the slow unfolding of the day. A bell rings again, closer this time. The sound spreads outward, touching the water, the buildings, the people beginning to step into the streets. It is not loud, but it is persistent, a gentle reminder that time is moving, that the city is waking, that you are moving with it. You slow your pace. There is no need to hurry. The day has only just begun, and already you can feel its rhythm forming around you. The quiet will not last forever. Soon the streets will fill, the markets will open, the noise will grow. But for now, there is this brief, suspended moment where everything feels possible and nothing feels urgent. You glance back once more at the canal you left behind. The water is still there, steady and patient, reflecting the pale sky. It will remain no matter how busy the day becomes, carrying its quiet presence through every hour. And without quite realizing it, you continue forward deeper into the narrow streets, where the city begins to reveal itself one small detail at a time. You move a little farther from the canal's edge, and almost immediately the space tightens around you. The open stretch of water fades behind your shoulder, replaced by a corridor of brick and shadow that feels both intimate and quietly enclosing. The street bends just enough that you cannot see its end, and that small uncertainty slows your steps in a gentle, curious way. Your shoes meet the ground with a soft scrape. The surface here is uneven, a mix of worn stone and packed earth that has been shaped by years of footsteps and cartwheels. It feels lived in, not polished. You notice how the buildings rise on either side, tall and narrow, their upper levels leaning slightly forward, as if trying to catch a glimpse of the street below. A commonly accepted historical detail tells us that many of these houses were built with a forward tilt, partly to make it easier to hoist goods up to the higher floors without scraping the facade. As you look up, You can see a small hook extending from the top of one building, a quiet clue that lifting and lowering cargo is part of daily life here. You pause for a moment, tilting your head back. The sky appears as a thin ribbon above you, pale and slowly brightening. The light filters down in layers, touching the upper windows first, then sliding lower until it reaches the street in soft patches. It feels almost like watching time descend. A window opens nearby with a faint wooden creak. You glance over just in time to see a man leaning out, lowering a small bucket tied to a rope. The motion is careful practiced. The bucket descends slowly toward the street, swaying slightly as it goes. A moment later, someone below places something inside, and the man begins to pull it back up, hand over hand, without a word exchanged. It's a quiet system, efficient in its own way. There's a curious tidbit that people sometimes overlook. In a city where space is limited and stairs are steep and narrow, moving goods through windows rather than doorways becomes surprisingly practical. You imagine how many times this simple exchange repeats itself each day, unnoticed, unremarkable, yet essential. You continue forward the street, guiding you gently. The air here feels different from the canal, less open, more concentrated. The smells linger longer. You catch hints of baking bread again, but also something sharper, perhaps leather being worked or waste waiting to be carried away. It is not overwhelming, just layered like the city itself. A small bridge appears ahead, crossing a narrower canal that you had not seen from the main waterway. It feels almost hidden, tucked between buildings, as if it belongs only to those who wandered this far in. You step onto it slowly. The wood beneath your feet is slightly damp, and it gives just a little with each step. You place your hand on the railing, feeling the grain of the wood, worn smooth in some places, rough in others. Below the water is darker here, reflecting less of the sky and more of the shadows around it. You lean slightly, looking down. A piece of debris drifts past, turning lazily in the current. It reminds you that these canals are not just decorative. They are working parts of the city, carrying more than just boats. Scholars still debate how residents of the time perceive the cleanliness of their waterways. Some evidence suggests they were well aware of the risks, while other accounts imply a kind of everyday acceptance, a balance between necessity and discomfort. As you watch the water, you sense that same balance. It is neither ignored nor fully controlled. You step off the bridge and into another narrow lane. This one feels quieter still. The sounds of the larger canal and the more active streets have faded, replaced by smaller, closer noises. A door closing, a muffled conversation behind a wall, the faint clatter of something being arranged indoors. You pass a series of doors, each one slightly different. Some are freshly painted, their colours still strong despite the damp air. Others are worn, their surfaces marked by time and weather. Small details catch your eye. A metal latch shaped like a hand, a carved wooden frame around a doorway, a tiny step worn down in the centre from years of use. You begin to notice how personal these spaces are. Even though the buildings are close together, almost touching, each one carries its own identity. A curtain drawn just so, a flower pot resting on a narrow ledge, a broom leaning beside a door ready for use. These small choices soften the tightness of the street, turning it from a passageway into a place where lives unfold. A child's voice echoes briefly, followed by a quick hush. You glance toward the sound and see a narrow side alley barely wide enough for two people to pass. For a moment you consider stepping into it, but something about the darkness there suggests it can wait. There is no need to rush into every corner at once. Instead, you keep moving forward. Your hand brushes again against the wall, almost without thinking. The texture is familiar now, grounding. You feel more at ease than before, as if the city has begun to accept your presence. The light continues to grow. It reaches deeper into the street now, illuminating details that were hidden just moments ago. You notice the slight warping of the glass in the windows, bending reflections into soft distortions. You notice how some of the bricks vary in colour, hints of repair and change over time. There is a quiet realization that settles in. This city is not fixed. It is constantly adjusting, adapting, rebuilding. What you see now is only a moment in its long life, a snapshot that will shift again and again. You hear footsteps approaching. A man walks toward you carrying a bundle of something wrapped in cloth. He nods briefly as he passes, not unfriendly, simply acknowledging your presence without pausing. It feels natural, unforced. People here move with purpose, but not with haste. You follow the curve of the street as it opens slightly. Ahead, the space widens just enough to let in more light, and you can sense that you are moving toward a busier part of the city. The quiet of the narrow lane begins to give way to a low hum of activity. You slow again just for a moment. There is something comforting about these tight streets, these in-between spaces where the city feels close and contained. You know that as you move forward, the pace will change, the sounds will grow, the day will become more demanding. But for now, you are still within this softer edge of morning. You take one last look back down the lane you have just walked. It seems smaller now, already fading into memory, its details blending together. And yet you know that it is still there, holding its quiet routines, its small exchanges, its steady presence. Then you turn forward once more, stepping into the widening light where the city begins to open itself more fully to you. You follow the widening street as it gently carries you into a more open stretch, and with that small shift the city seems to take a fuller breath. The buildings remain tall and narrow, but there is a sense now that you are approaching the inside of daily life, rather than simply walking along its edges. A door stands slightly open ahead of you. Warm light spills out onto the street softer than the grey morning outside. You slow without thinking, drawn by the quiet invitation of it. There is no sign to stop you, no barrier, just the ordinary openness of a household already awake. You step closer. Inside the space is narrower than you might expect. Yet it stretches upward beyond what you can immediately see. A commonly accepted historical reality is that Amsterdam homes of this period were built deep and tall rather than wide, with multiple floors stacked carefully above one another. From where you stand, you can sense that vertical life, even if most of it remains hidden above. The air inside feels warmer, carrying the comforting scent of bread and something gently simmering. You step across the threshold. The floor beneath your feet is wooden, slightly uneven, worn smooth, in places where many feet have passed. A table sits near the centre of the room, sturdy and practical, with a few simple chairs arranged around it. Nothing here feels excessive. Everything has a purpose. A woman stands near the hearth, her movements calm and steady. She stirs something in a pot, pausing occasionally to adjust the fire. The soft crackle of burning peat fills the space, a quiet, constant sound that seems to anchor the room. She glances toward you briefly. There is no surprise in her expression, only a mild curiosity, as if visitors drifting in and out of daily life are not entirely unusual. She nods once, then returns her attention to the pot. At the table, a man sits with a small ledger open before him. He runs his finger along a line of numbers, lips moving slightly as he counts. A quill rests nearby, along with a small inkwell. Even at this early hour, the work of keeping track of goods and money has already begun. You take a step further inside, careful not to disturb the rhythm of the room. There is a child seated on a low stool near the wall, holding a piece of bread in both hands. They watch you for a moment with open curiosity, then return their attention to eating as if deciding that you are not particularly remarkable after all. A lesser known but intriguing detail is that many households like this one functioned as both home and workplace. Goods might be stored in the back, sold from the front, and managed at the table where meals are also shared. The boundaries between personal and professional life are soft, overlapping in ways that feel natural here. You notice how everything fits together. The table is not just for eating. It is for counting, for writing, for planning. The hearth is not just for warmth. It is for cooking, for light, for gathering. Even the walls seem to hold more than they show, with small shelves and hooks that keep tools and items within easy reach. You move slightly to the side, allowing more light to fall across the room. The windows are small, and the glass is imperfect, bending the outside world into gentle distortions. The canal you left behind appears faintly through it, stretched and softened, as if seen through memory rather than reality. The man at the table dips his quill into the ink. He writes a short line, pauses, then nods to himself. There is a quiet satisfaction in the motion, a sense that this small act is part of something larger, trade planning, calculation. Even here, in this narrow room, the wider world is present. Some historians have suggested that the success of Amsterdam's merchants depended not only on large voyages and grand deals, but also on these daily habits of careful record keeping. Watching him now, it is easy to believe that. The city's wealth does not begin at sea. It begins here with ink and attention. The woman lifts the lid from the pot. A small cloud of steam rises, carrying a richer scent into the room. She takes a spoon, tastes, then adds something from a small container nearby. Her movements are precise, practiced. There is no hesitation, only a quiet familiarity with each step. You realise how calm everything feels. There is work happening, certainly. There are tasks to be done, responsibilities to manage. Yet nothing feels rushed. The pace is steady, measured, almost gentle. You hear a faint sound from above. Footsteps, soft and slow, moving across a higher floor. It reminds you again of the vertical nature of this home, how life continues above and below you at the same time. Perhaps someone is waking or preparing to come down. Perhaps they are already working out of sight. You glance toward the back of the room. There is a narrow passage leading deeper into the house, its details hidden by shadow. It suggests storage or another small room, or perhaps access to a courtyard beyond. The space feels layered, extending beyond what is immediately visible. Historians still argue whether these homes felt crowded or efficient to those who lived in them. As you stand here, it seems like a bit of both. The space is limited, certainly, yet it is used so thoughtfully that it does not feel chaotic. It feels contained, organised, lived in. The child finishes their bread and wipes their hands on a cloth. They glance at you again, this time with a hint of a smile, as if you have become a quiet part of their morning routine. Then they stand moving toward the back of the room with small, quick steps. The man closes his ledger. He rests his hand on it for a moment, as if marking the end of one small task before the next begins. Then he looks toward the woman and they exchange a brief glance. No words are needed. There is an understanding there built from shared work and shared space. You feel a subtle shift. The day is beginning to gather momentum. What was calm is becoming active, though still quietly so. The city outside is likely doing the same, each household, waking each person stepping into their role. You take a step back towards the doorway. The cooler air from outside meets the warmth of the room, creating a gentle contrast. For a moment you linger there between two worlds, inside the steady rhythm of home, outside the growing movement of the city. Then you step out once more onto the street. The light has strengthened. The sounds have grown slightly louder. The day is no longer just beginning, it is unfolding. And you move forward again, carrying with you the quiet understanding of how much life can fit within even the narrowest of walls. You step back into the street and the change is immediate. The quiet, contained feeling of the household fades behind you as the city begins to gather itself into something louder, fuller and more alive. The air carries more voices now, layered together in a way that feels almost like a low tide rising. You follow the sound without thinking, drawn toward it, as the narrow street opens into a wider space. The market reveals itself gradually. First, a cart appears, its wooden wheels creaking softly as it is guided into position. Then a table already laid out with loaves of bread arranged in careful rows. Then another covered with fish laid on crushed ice, their silver bodies catching the growing light. You step closer. The ground here is busier, marked by footprints, scattered straw, and the faint traces of yesterday's trade. Your shoes brush against a stray piece of vegetable peel, and you notice how the space feels used, not just visited. This is not a place that rests for long. A widely recognised historical pattern shows that Amsterdam's markets were central to daily life, providing not only food, but also a place for exchange, conversation, and the steady negotiation of survival. Standing here, you can feel that truth without needing to be told. A woman calls out nearby. Her voice is clear, but not harsh, practiced in a way that carries just far enough to be heard without overwhelming the space. She gestures toward her goods, encouraging passers-by to look, to consider, to stop for a moment. You move along the edge of the stalls. Bread first. The smell is warm and inviting, with a slight tang that suggests a slow fermentation. The crusts are dark, the shapes slightly uneven. You can almost feel the texture before you touch it. Next, fish. The scent sharpens, cutting through the softer smells of the morning. A man stands behind the display, his hands moving quickly as he adjusts the arrangement. He looks up briefly, meeting your gaze, then returns to his work. Efficiency seems to matter here. There is a small detail that often escapes notice. Fish in Amsterdam are not just food, but a constant presence tied to trade routes, preservation, methods, and the rhythms of supply. Some are fresh, others salted or smoked, each telling a slightly different story of how they arrived here. You continue forward. Voices overlap now, not loud enough to feel chaotic, but constant enough to create a steady hum. Bargaining begins in quiet tones. A question, an answer, a slight shake of the head, then a nod. Coins change hands with a soft metallic sound. You pause near a stall selling vegetables. The colours are muted compared to what you might expect today. Greens, browns, pale yellows. The produce is shaped by the seasons and the limits of local growing. A woman inspects a bundle of roots, turning them carefully as if searching for something specific within their imperfections. A thoughtful reading of the period suggests that diet here is simple but sustaining, built around what can be stored, preserved, or brought in through trade. Luxury exists certainly, but it is not the foundation of everyday meals. You notice a boy carrying a basket that seems almost too large for him. He moves carefully, weaving between people with surprising skill. His steps are quick but measured, avoiding collisions without breaking his rhythm. When he reaches the stall, he sets the basket down and exchanges a few quiet words with the seller. You wonder how long he has been doing this. In a place like this, work begins early. Learning happens through repetition, through watching, through doing. There is no clear boundary between childhood and responsibility, only a gradual shift from one into the other. A man nearby laughs. It is a brief sound, but it stands out against the steady background noise. You glance over and see a small group gathered around a stall, their conversation animated but friendly. One of them gestures toward a piece of cloth, shaking his head with exaggerated disbelief, as if the price suggested is more amusing than offensive. You find yourself smiling slightly. The market is not only about necessity, it's also about interaction, about the small moments of connection that fill the spaces between transactions. A question lingers among scholars regarding how orderly these markets truly were. Some descriptions paint a picture of careful regulation with designated spaces and rules. Others hint at a more fluid environment shaped by habit and negotiation rather than strict control. As you stand here, it feels balanced somewhere in between. There is structure certainly, but there is also room for improvisation. You move toward a stall where something sweet catches your attention. Small pastries, their surfaces slightly glossy, are arranged on a wooden tray. The smell is subtle but distinct, a gentle contrast to the heavier scents around you. You watch as a woman selects one, handing over a coin in exchange. For a moment you imagine the taste. Not overly sweet perhaps, but rich enough to feel like a small comfort in the middle of a busy day. You continue walking. The space shifts again as you move through it. Some areas feel more crowded, others slightly open. The flow of people changes constantly, adjusting itself without any clear direction. It is like watching water move, finding its own paths. A cart passes behind you, its wheels louder now on the uneven ground. You step aside instinctively, allowing it to move through. The man guiding it nods in acknowledgement, his focus already on where he is going next. The light has fully arrived now. It touches everything more clearly, revealing details that were softened before. The textures of cloth, the roughness of wood, the sheen of metal. The market is no longer emerging, it is fully awake. You slow your pace once more. There is so much to take in, yet nothing demands your attention all at once. You can move at your own rhythm, pausing when something catches your interest, continuing when it fades. The sounds, the smells, the motion all blend into something steady, something almost soothing despite its activity. You glance back briefly. The narrow streets you came from feel distant now, though you know they are only a few turns away. The city is unfolding in layers, each one revealing a different aspect of life. And as you turn forward again, you sense that beyond this market, more of those layers are waiting. You drift beyond the edge of the market and the hum of voices softens behind you, replaced by a deeper, steadier rhythm. The air changes first. It becomes heavier, tinged with the scent of wood tar rope, and something faintly sweet that you cannot quite name. You follow it without urgency, your steps naturally aligning with a slower, more deliberate pace. The space opens again. The buildings here are larger, broader at their base, their doors taller and more functional. You notice wide openings at street level. Some already active, others just beginning to stir. These are not homes in the way you saw earlier. These are places of storage, of movement, of transition. You approach one of the open doorways. Inside the light is dim, filtered through small high windows. Your eyes adjust slowly, revealing rows of barrels stacked carefully along the walls. Each one is marked, some with symbols, others with words you cannot fully make out from where you stand. A widely accepted understanding of Amsterdam's economy highlights the importance of these warehouses. Goods from across Europe and far beyond pass through spaces like this, stored, counted, traded and moved again. Standing here, you sense how much of the city's wealth sits quietly, in places just like this, waiting. A man stands near the entrance checking a list. His finger moves down the page, pausing at each line. He glances toward the barrels, then back to the paper, matching one to the other. There is a calm precision in his work, a quiet attention that feels as essential as any ship crossing the sea. You step inside a little further. The floor is solid but worn, bearing the marks of heavy use. Scratches dent small darkened patches where something has spilled or been dragged. You can almost hear the echoes of earlier activity, the shifting of weight, the dull thud of barrels being set down. Above you, a rope hangs from a beam. It disappears upward through a small opening, suggesting a pulley system beyond your view. You recall the narrow houses with their hooks, and here you see a larger version of the same idea. Goods do not simply move along the ground in this city, they rise and fall, carried between levels with quiet efficiency. There is a small but fascinating detail that often goes unnoticed. Many of these warehouses are designed with slightly sloped floors, allowing any spilled liquid to drain away rather than collect. It is a simple solution, but one that speaks to experience, to learning from repeated use. You step back toward the doorway. Outside, the canal runs wider here, its surface more active. Boats move slowly along it, some guided by poles, others by sails that catch just enough wind to push them forward. The water reflects more movement now, broken by ripples that spread outward in overlapping patterns. You walk along the edge. The ground feels firmer here, reinforced to support the constant flow of goods. You pass a group of men working together to roll a barrel from one position to another. Their movements are coordinated without being spoken. A push, a shift, a steadying hand. The barrel settles into place with a soft final sound. You pause to watch. There is no rush in their actions, yet nothing is wasted. Each movement serves a purpose, part of a larger rhythm that keeps everything moving without chaos. A thoughtful interpretation of the period suggests that labour like this formed the quiet backbone of Amsterdam's success. While merchants and ships often receive the attention, it is this steady physical work that allows everything else to function. You continue along the canal. The smell of spices becomes more noticeable now. It drifts from somewhere ahead, warm and unfamiliar, carrying hints of places far beyond this city. You follow it curious. A smaller warehouse stands open. Inside, the barrels are different. Some are smaller, others sealed more tightly. A man opens one, carefully lifting the lid just enough to inspect its contents. As he does, the scent grows stronger, rich and layered. You breathe it in slowly. It is not a smell you encounter often. It feels distant, almost exotic, as if it carries a story from another part of the world. You wonder where it came from. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how aware ordinary people were of the vast distances behind these goods. Some argue that the origins were well understood, while others suggest that the products became familiar even if their journeys remained abstract. As you stand here, it feels like both could be true. The spices are real, immediate. Their origins are something you sense rather than fully grasp. You step back outside. The light reflects off the water in brighter flashes, now catching your eye as it shifts. A boat passes close to the edge, its cargo covered with a rough cloth. The man guiding it nods briefly as he moves past his attention, already on what lies ahead. You notice how everything connects. The warehouses, the boats, the workers, the streets. Each part feeds into the next, forming a network that moves goods from arrival to storage to trade. It is not a single action, but a continuous flow. A cart approaches from behind. You hear it before you see it, the wheels producing a steady rhythm against the ground. You step aside, allowing it to pass. The driver offers a quick glance of acknowledgement, then continues without slowing. You resume your walk. The canal stretches ahead, lined with more of these working spaces. Some are quiet, others active, each one holding a different stage of the same process. The city here feels purposeful, grounded in tasks that must be completed, goods that must be handled. Yet there is still a calmness to it. The movements are steady, the sounds consistent, the pace controlled. It does not feel frantic, it feels practiced. You slow once more, letting yourself absorb it. This is a different side of the city from the narrow streets and quiet homes. It is more open, more direct, more focused on movement and exchange. Yet it is just as essential, just as much a part of the whole. You glance back toward the market you left behind. It feels distant now, though, not far in space. Just another layer, another rhythm within the same place. Then you turn forward again. The canal continues, and with it the sense that even more of the city is waiting just beyond your next step. You continue along the canal, and the movement of water begins to feel more deliberate. The boats here are larger, their shapes fuller, their presence harder to ignore. The air shifts again, carrying a sharper edge of salt and tar, mixed with something unfamiliar that seems to hint at distance rather than place. The space widens. The canal opens into a broader stretch where several vessels rest side by side, their wooden hulls darkened by years of use. Ropes stretch from deck to dock, pulled taut, creaking softly with each small motion of the water. You slow your steps, drawn toward the quiet intensity of this place. A well-established historical fact is that Amsterdam, in the 17th century, stood at the centre of global trade networks, with ships arriving from regions as distant as Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Standing here, you do not need a map to feel that reach. It is present in the scale of the ships, in the variety of goods, in the quiet confidence of those who move among them. You step closer to the dock. The wood beneath your feet is solid but worn, its surface marked by years of loading and unloading. You can feel a faint vibration as something heavy is shifted nearby, a subtle reminder that the work here never truly pauses. A group of sailors stands near one of the ships. Their clothing is practical, layered against wind and weather. Their voices are low, their movements efficient. One of them lifts a crate with the help of another, the two of them adjusting their grip without needing to speak. There is a familiarity in their actions that suggests long practice, perhaps even shared journeys. You watch as the crate is carried toward the edge. A rope is lowered, a hook secured, and the crate begins to rise, slowly guided upward toward the deck above. The motion is steady, careful. No sudden movements, no wasted effort. There is a curious detail that often escapes notice. Many ships arriving here carried not only goods, but also the marks of their long voyages, subtle changes in wood, in rope, in the very smell of the vessel. If you stand close enough, you might detect traces of spices, damp cloth, even distant climates, carried within the grain of the ship itself. You inhale gently. The scent is complex. Salt, certainly. Tar, strong and grounding. But also something softer, something that does not belong entirely to this place. It feels like a whisper of another shore. You move along the dock. Another ship rests nearby, smaller but still substantial. Its deck is busier with men moving back and forth, adjusting lines, checking cargo, speaking in brief exchanges. You catch fragments of different accents, slight variations in tone that suggest journeys beyond the familiar. Some historians have noted that ports like this were among the most culturally mixed places in Europe at the time, where languages and customs overlapped in quiet, practical ways. As you listen, you can sense that blending not as something dramatic, but as something woven into everyday interaction. A man steps down from the ship onto the dock. He pauses for a moment, stretching his back, then looks out over the canal as if taking in the stillness after movement. There is a tiredness in his posture, but also a kind of calm, as if arriving here brings a brief moment of rest before the next task begins. You continue walking. The dock curves slightly, leading you past more vessels, each one at a different stage of its journey. Some are being unloaded, their cargo carefully transferred to waiting hands. Others appear ready to depart, their sails secured, their decks organised. You notice how everything feels connected. The goods you saw in the warehouses, the items in the market, the quiet calculations in the household. All of it begins here or returns here, carried across water that stretches far beyond what you can see. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how aware ordinary residents were of the full scope of these global connections. Some suggest that the scale of trade was widely understood, while others believe it was experienced more through objects than through knowledge of their origins. As you stand here, it feels like both perspectives hold some truth. The ships are real immediate. Their journeys remain vast, almost abstract. You pause near the edge of the water. The surface moves gently, reflecting the hulls of the ships in broken lines. A rope dips into the canal, darkened where it meets the water. Small ripples spread outward, catching the light in brief flashes. A crate is set down nearby with a soft, heavy sound. You glance over as it is opened slightly, just enough to check its contents. Inside you see tightly packed goods, wrapped, carefully protected from the long journey they have endured. You cannot see exactly what they are, but their presence feels significant, as if they carry value beyond their size. A sailor wipes his hands on a cloth. He looks towards you briefly, then back to his work. There is no curiosity in his expression, only focus. This is routine, repeated many times, each step familiar. You begin to feel the rhythm of it. Lift, carry, secure, check, repeat. It is steady, almost hypnotic. A small boat passes between the larger ships. It moves quietly, guided with precision through the narrow space. Its cargo is modest compared to the vessels around it, yet it plays its part just the same, connecting one point to another within this larger system. You follow its path with your eyes. It disappears beyond the curve of the canal, leaving only the soft disturbance of water behind. The light has grown stronger now. It reflects off the surfaces around you, highlighting the textures of wood, rope and cloth. The scene feels clearer, more defined, yet still calm in its own way. You take a slow breath. There is something grounding about this place. The sense of movement, of purpose, of connection to something larger than any single person or task. You turn slightly, looking back along the dock. The ships, the workers, the water all continue their steady motion unchanged by your presence. It is a reminder that this city moves on its own rhythm, one that you are only beginning to understand. Then you turn forward again. The canal stretches on, carrying with it the quiet promise of more to discover, more layers to uncover as you continue your walk through this city shaped by water and trade. You leave the edge of the dock behind, and the sound of water and rope gradually softens into something more contained. The air shifts again, losing some of its salt and tar, gaining instead the faint dryness of paper, ink and wood that has not been exposed to open weather. The street narrows slightly, though not as tightly as before. Here the buildings feel more deliberate. Their facades are clean, their windows larger, their doors solid and carefully maintained. There is a sense of quiet importance, not in the way of display, but in the way of function. You pause at an open doorway. Inside, the light is brighter than you expect. It reflects off pale walls and a polished table that sits near the centre of the room. Papers are spread across its surface, some stacked neatly, others in small working piles. You step in. The room is calm, almost still. A man sits at the table, his posture upright, his attention fixed on a large book open before him. His hand moves slowly, guiding a quill across the page with steady precision. A broadly recognised feature of Amsterdam's commercial life is the reliance on meticulous bookkeeping. Trade here depends not only on ships and goods, but on records agreements and trust built through careful documentation. Watching him write, you can sense how much rests on these quiet lines of ink. He pauses. His eyes scan what he has just written, then move to another page. He makes a small adjustment, adding a number, crossing out another. The movements are subtle, yet deliberate. You glance around the room. Maps hang on the walls, their surfaces marked with lines that stretch across oceans and continents. Some are detailed, others more suggestive, but all of them point outward beyond the boundaries of the city. There's an interesting detail that often slips past casual notice. Many of these maps were not purely decorative. They were working tools updated as new information arrived, reflecting a world that was still being charted and understood. You step closer to the table. The ink glistens slightly where it is still fresh. The paper feels thick, textured, made to endure handling. You notice how the numbers are arranged in careful columns, each entry aligned with quiet discipline. The man dips his quill again. This time he writes more quickly, as if completing a thought that has already formed in his mind. When he finishes, he leans back slightly, letting out a slow breath. There is no drama in his expression, only concentration followed by a brief moment of rest. A second man stands near the window. He holds a smaller document, reading it with a slight furrow in his brow. The light from outside falls across his face, illuminating the fine details of his focus. After a moment, he looks up. They exchange a few quiet words. The tone is measured, practical. You cannot catch every detail, but you sense the rhythm of agreement, of clarification, of decisions made without unnecessary emphasis. A line of inquiry among historians considers how much of this work relied on personal relationships versus formal systems. Some evidence suggests that trust between individuals played a central role, while other sources point to the growing importance of standardized practices. As you watch these two men, it feels like both are present. The documents matter, but so does the understanding between them. You move toward the window. Outside, the canal continues its steady motion, a reminder that everything written here connects to something moving out there. A boat passes its cargo, hidden beneath a covering its destination unknown to you, but clearly known to someone in this room. You return your attention to the table. A small object catches your eye. It is a seal resting beside a folded document. Its surface is smooth, its edges worn from use. You imagine it pressed into wax, marking an agreement as complete as binding. There is a quiet significance in such objects. They represent more than function. They carry authority, finality, a sense that what has been decided will hold. The man at the table closes the large book. He places his hand on its cover for a moment, as if acknowledging the work contained within. Then he reaches for another stack of papers, beginning again. You notice how the room remains calm, even as decisions are made. As numbers are recorded, as plans are formed, there is no sense of urgency. Everything moves at a steady pace, guided by attention rather than haste. A faint sound reaches you from above. Footsteps, perhaps, or the shifting of something heavy. It reminds you that this building, like the others, extends upward, holding more activity than what you see here. You take a slow breath. The air feels different from the dock, from the market, from the narrow streets. It is quieter, more controlled, shaped by thought rather than movement, you begin to understand something. The city's life is not only in its visible activity, it is also here in these rooms where decisions are written down, where numbers are balanced, where the future is quietly arranged. The second man folds his document. He seals it carefully, pressing the wax with practiced precision. Then he sets it aside, ready to be sent on its way. You step back slightly. The doorway remains open, the street beyond, waiting. You feel the pull of movement again, the sense that there is more to see, more to understand. Before you leave, you take one last look. The table, the maps, the quiet focus of the men. It all feels steady, grounded, essential in a way that is easy to overlook. Then you turn and step outside. The air greets you again, lighter, carrying the distant sounds of the city. The canal glimmers in the growing light, and the streets continue their quiet flow. You move forward once more, carrying with you the awareness that beneath every visible action in this city, there is a quieter layer where everything is carefully kept in balance. You step away from the quiet order of the counting room, and the air outside feels fuller again, filled with movement that is less measured, more physical. The streets here carry a different rhythm, one shaped by hands and tools rather than ink and numbers. The ground is busier under your feet. You hear the steady tap of wood on wood somewhere ahead, followed by the scrape of something heavy being dragged into place. The sounds are not loud, but they are constant, forming a background pulse that guides you forward. You turn a corner. The space opens into a working street where activity gathers in small clusters. Not crowded like the market, but focused. Each group is engaged in its own task, each movement purposeful. A cooper sits beside a half-finished barrel. His tools are laid out neatly within reach. He lifts a curved wooden stave, fitting it into place with careful pressure. Then comes the tap of a hammer, soft but precise, guiding the shape into alignment. A widely accepted point about cities like this is that skilled trades form the backbone of daily life, organised into guilds that controlled training quality and access to work. Watching him now, you can sense the discipline behind each movement. This is not improvisation. It is knowledge passed down, practiced, refined. You linger for a moment. The cooper adjusts a metal hoop, sliding it down over the wood, tightening the structure. The barrel begins to take its final shape, something that will soon hold goods travel distances and become part of the larger system you have already glimpsed. You move on. Nearby, a brewer stands beside large wooden vats. The smell reaches you before the sight fully does. It is rich, slightly sweet, with a hint of fermentation that feels warm rather than sharp. He stirs the contents with a long paddle, his movements slow and steady. There is a small but interesting detail that people sometimes overlook. Beer in this period is often safer to drink than water, making it a daily staple rather than a luxury. You imagine how many households rely on what begins in spaces like this. The brewer pauses, lifting the paddle slightly, then lowering it again. Steam rises faintly, catching the light for a moment before fading. You continue along the street. A pair of porters passes you, carrying a heavy load suspended between them. Their steps are synchronized, their breathing steady. They do not speak yet. Their coordination suggests long familiarity with this kind of work. You step aside, giving them space. As they pass, you notice the strain in their shoulders, the quiet endurance in their movement. This is work that relies on strength, but also on rhythm, on knowing how to carry weight without letting it carry you. A thoughtful interpretation of urban life in this era suggests that much of the city's visible prosperity depended on labour that remained largely unseen in formal records. Standing here, it feels clear. These movements, these tasks form the foundation beneath everything else. You walk further. A woman kneels near a doorway, scrubbing the stone with a brush. Her movements are repetitive, almost meditative. Water splashes lightly as she works the surface, gradually becoming cleaner under her effort. She pauses briefly, adjusting her grip, then continues without looking up. There is no audience for her work, yet it shapes the space just as surely as any trade or transaction. You pass a small workshop. Inside, a craftsman works with leather, his hands moving carefully along the surface of a piece he is shaping. The smell is strong but not unpleasant, a mix of material and process. He glances up as you pass, offering a brief nod before returning to his task. A question that remains open among historians concerns how rigidly guild structures controlled access to these trades. Some evidence points to strict boundaries, while other accounts suggest a degree of flexibility, especially in times of high demand. As you observe the variety of work around you, it feels as though both order and adaptation are at play. You continue walking. The street narrows slightly again, but the activity remains. A young apprentice carries tools from one place to another, his steps quick, his attention divided between where he is going and what he is holding. You watch him for a moment. There is a sense of learning in his movement, of being in between stages. Not yet skilled, but no longer entirely new. The sounds around you blend together. Hammering, scraping voices exchanged in short phrases, the occasional laugh that rises and fades quickly. It is not chaotic. It is layered, each sound finding its place within the whole. You notice how different this feels from the counting room. There, everything was quiet, contained, guided by thought. Here, everything is tangible, shaped by touch, by effort, by repetition. You slow your pace. There is something steadying about this kind of work. It does not demand attention in the same way as the market or the dock. It invites observation patience. A man lifts a finished object from a bench. He turns it in his hands, inspecting it from different angles. After a moment he nods to himself, satisfied. The gesture is small, but it carries a quiet pride. You continue forward. The street begins to shift again, the activity thinning slightly as you move toward another part of the city. The sounds soften the clusters of work, becoming less dense. You glance back briefly. The cooper, the brewer, the porters, the woman at the doorway. Each remains in place, continuing their tasks, their movements unchanged by your passing. Then you turn forward once more. The city stretches ahead, still unfolding, still revealing new layers with each step you take. You move away from the steady rhythm of tools and hands, and the sounds of labour soften behind you. The street becomes quieter again, though not empty. There is a different kind of presence here, less visible, more carefully contained. The buildings shift subtly. Their facades are modest, their doors plain, yet there is something deliberate in their simplicity. Curtains hang thicker in the windows, drawn in a way that suggests privacy rather than decoration. You slow your steps without quite knowing why. A door stands closed, but you hear something beyond it. A low murmur, voices soft and measured, rising and falling in a pattern that feels intentional. Not conversation exactly, but something more structured. You pause. The sound carries through the wood, faint but steady. You cannot make out the words yet. The tone feels familiar in its purpose. It is a gathering, a shared moment shaped by belief. A widely recognised aspect of Amsterdam in this period is its reputation for religious tolerance, especially compared to other parts of Europe. Different groups are allowed to exist here to worship, though not always openly or without restriction. As you stand outside this quiet doorway, you sense that balance. Presence, but not display. You step a little closer. The door does not open yet, the sound continues, contained within. It feels almost as if the building itself is holding the moment, protecting it from the street. There is an interesting detail that often goes unnoticed. Some places of worship in Amsterdam at this time are hidden within ordinary buildings, known today as concealed churches. From the outside, they appear no different from any other home. Inside, they hold spaces of devotion carefully arranged out of public view. You imagine what might be beyond the wall. A room cleared of furniture, benches arranged in rows, light falling through windows softened by fabric. People gathered quietly, their voices blending into something shared and steady. You remain still for a moment longer. The sound has a calming effect even without understanding it. It carries a sense of continuity, of something practiced and repeated over time. Then it fades slightly, or perhaps you move just far enough away that it becomes less distinct. You continue walking. The street bends gently, leading you past more of these quiet facades. Some doors remain closed. Others open briefly, revealing only a glimpse of interior life before closing again. A woman steps out from one doorway. She adjusts her shawl, glances up and down the street, then moves on with quiet purpose. There is nothing hurried in her movement, only a sense of intention. You follow at a distance. The street widens slightly, and the sounds of the city begin to return, though still muted. A cart rolls somewhere nearby. A voice calls out softer than in the market, but still present. You pass another building where a window stands partially open. Inside, you see a small gathering of people seated close together. Their heads are bowed slightly, their posture attentive. A man stands at the front, speaking in a calm, even tone. You do not stop this time. It feels like something meant to be observed from a distance, not entered. A space that belongs to those within it. A thoughtful reading of the period suggests that this form of quiet coexistence required constant negotiation. Freedom existed, but within boundaries that were understood rather than always spoken. As you move through to this street, you can feel that careful balance in the way life unfolds. You continue forward. The buildings begin to change again. Their windows more open, their doors less guarded. The sense of quiet containment gives way to a more visible rhythm. Yet something lingers. The memory of those soft voices, the hidden spaces, the sense of something important happening just out of sight. You slow your pace. There is a different kind of life here, one that does not announce itself. It exists alongside everything else, woven into the fabric of the city without drawing attention. A question remains among scholars about how deeply these religious differences shaped daily interactions. Some suggest that divisions remained strong beneath the surface, while others argue that practical concerns often softened them. As you walk, it feels like both possibilities exist at once, shifting depending on where you stand. You reach the end of the street. Ahead, the space opens again, and the sounds of the city grow clearer. The quieter world you just passed through begins to fade into the background, though not entirely. You glance back once more. The doors remain closed. The windows reveal little, yet you know now that within those walls something steady continues. Then you turn forward. The city moves on, and you move with it, carrying that quiet awareness into whatever comes next. You step out from the quiet, curtain-drawn street, and the city opens again into something more visible, more outward in its motion. The air feels lighter here, touched by a mix of familiar smells. Bread smoke, damp stone, and the faint sweetness of something cooking just out of sight. The street carries a steady flow of movement, not hurried, not chaotic, but continuous. People pass in both directions, each one holding a small piece of the day's work. A basket, a folded cloth, a bundle tied with rope. You notice something shift in your attention. The patterns of movement begin to reveal who is doing what, who belongs to which rhythm. And gradually you begin to see how much of this city's daily life rests in the hands of women. A well-documented aspect of Amsterdam society during this period is that women often played active roles in both household management and small-scale trade. As you walk, this becomes less of an abstract idea and more of a visible truth. A woman stands at a doorway ahead speaking with a customer. A small table has been set just outside displaying a few items, cloth perhaps, or prepared food. The exchange is calm, measured. Coins pass from one hand to another, and the woman nods slightly as she gathers the payment. There is no spectacle in it, just a quiet transaction repeated many times over the course of a day. You move a little closer. Her posture is steady, her movements practiced. She adjusts the arrangement on the table with a small, efficient gesture, ensuring everything is visible, accessible. You continue walking. Further along, another woman carries a basket balanced against her hip. She moves with confidence, navigating the uneven ground without hesitation. A child walks beside her, holding onto the edge of her skirt. There is a small but revealing detail that often escapes attention. In many households, women are responsible not only for cooking and cleaning, but also for managing accounts, overseeing supplies, and maintaining connections with customers or neighbours. Their work moves quietly between spaces linking home and street. You watch as she pauses. She shifts the basket slightly, adjusting its weight, then continues on without breaking her rhythm. You pass a window where two women sit inside. They work with their hands sewing or mending, their conversation flowing easily between them. The movement of needle and thread is steady, almost soothing to watch. Their voices rise and fall in soft patterns, blending with the sounds of the street. You do not hear every word, but you sense the familiarity, the shared understanding that shapes their interaction. A perspective often discussed by historians considers how visible women's contributions were in records compared to their actual impact. While official documents sometimes focus on male merchants and guild members, everyday observation suggests a much broader participation. As you move through this street, that broader presence feels undeniable. You continue forward. A shop stands open, its interior extending slightly deeper than the others you have seen. Inside, a woman arranges items on a shelf, her movements careful and deliberate. She steps back, studies the arrangement, then adjusts one piece slightly. There is an attention to detail here, a sense that presentation matters even in small ways. You step closer to the entrance. She glances up briefly, offering a polite acknowledgement before returning to her task. There is no interruption, only a smooth continuation of her work. You move on. The street curves gently, and with it the flow of people shifts again. You notice how women move through these spaces with a quiet authority, not loudly directing, not drawing attention, yet clearly shaping what happens around them. A woman calls to someone across the street. Her voice carries just enough to reach its destination. A brief exchange follows, practical, efficient. Then both return to what they were doing. You slow your pace. There is something steadying in this kind of activity. It does not demand focus in the way of the docks or the market. It unfolds naturally, each task fitting into the next. You pass a doorway where a woman kneels beside a child. She adjusts the child's clothing, smoothing fabric, tying something securely. The child stands still, patient, accustomed to the routine. Then they both rise. The child moves ahead, the woman following their steps, aligning as they join the flow of the street. You continue walking. The light has settled fully now, illuminating the details of everything around you. The textures of fabric, the worn edges of doorways, the subtle expressions on faces as people pass. A question that remains open in historical discussion concerns how women balanced these multiple roles within the constraints of the time. Some accounts emphasize limitation, while others highlight adaptability and influence within everyday life. As you observe the street, it feels less like a contradiction and more like a layered reality. You reach a point where the street begins to open again. The sound shifts slightly, growing a bit louder, hinting at another transition ahead. You pause for a moment. Looking back, you see the quiet exchanges, the steady movements, the subtle ways in which the rhythm of the city has been shaped. Then you turn forward once more. The day continues to unfold, and you follow it, carrying with you a clearer sense of how much of this place is held together by hands that rarely seek attention, yet never truly leave the centre of it all. You move into the next stretch of street, and the tone shifts again, softer in some ways, yet filled with a different kind of energy. The sounds here are lighter, not the weight of goods or the rhythm of tools, but something quicker, less controlled. You hear it before you fully see it. Laughter. It rises suddenly bright and unguarded, then fades just as quickly as footsteps scatter across the ground. You follow the sound with a small sense of curiosity. The space opens into a modest square, not large but wide enough to gather movement. A few children run across it, their steps uneven but full of purpose. One of them carries a stick, dragging it lightly along the ground, creating a soft scraping sound that follows behind like a quiet companion. You slow your pace. There is something different here. The structure of the city feels looser, less defined by task and more by motion. A widely accepted understanding of life in this period is that childhood was shaped early by responsibility, yet still allowed moments of play within the gaps of daily work. As you watch, that balance becomes visible. One child pauses, crouching to pick something up from the ground, a small object, perhaps a stone or a piece of wood. They examine it briefly, then show it to another. A quick exchange follows, animated but brief, before both are drawn back into movement. You notice how easily they shift from stillness to action, from focus to distraction, without hesitation. A woman stands at the edge of the square. Her arms are folded, her posture relaxed but attentive. She watches the children with a quiet awareness, stepping in only when necessary. When one of them moves too close to a passing cart, she calls out softly, guiding them back without breaking the flow of the moment. You continue walking. Near the corner, a small group of older children gathers around a man holding a book. They stand in a loose semicircle, their attention directed toward him as he speaks. His voice is steady, measured, carrying just enough to hold their focus. You move a little closer. The children's expressions vary. Some are fully engaged, eyes fixed on the page as he turns it. Others shift their weight, glancing around, their attention drifting and returning in small waves. There is a lesser-known detail that often escapes notice. Basic education in cities like Amsterdam was more accessible than in many other places at the time, though it varied widely depending on family means and social position. Watching this small gathering, you sense both opportunity and limitation existing side by side. The man pauses, pointing to a line. One child leans forward slightly, following his gesture. Another repeats something quietly under their breath, testing the sound of it. You step back again. The square holds multiple rhythms at once. Play, learning, observation, all unfolding together without clear separation. A boy runs past you, his steps quick, his focus entirely on something ahead. You turn slightly, watching as he joins another group near the edge of the space. They begin a game, their movements forming patterns that only they fully understand. There is a logic to it, even if it remains unspoken. A line of discussion among historians considers how discipline was taught during this period, often emphasizing obedience and repetition. Yet here you see something else as well, curiosity, experimentation, small moments of freedom within structure. You continue walking. At the far side of the square, a narrow doorway stands open. Inside, you catch a glimpse of a more formal setting. A room arranged with benches, a table at the front, a sense of order that contrasts with the fluid movement outside. You do not enter. Instead, you linger just long enough to sense the difference. The shift from open space to contained learning, from movement to stillness. You move on. The street beyond the square narrows again, guiding you away from the cluster of activity. The sounds soften, though traces of laughter still echo faintly behind you. You notice how the city accommodates these transitions. Spaces for work, for trade, for quiet, for play. Each one connected yet distinct. A child walks beside you for a few steps. They glance up briefly, curious but not hesitant, then turn off down a side lane, their attention already captured by something else. You continue forward. The light has settled into a steady presence, now illuminating everything without the shifting uncertainty of early morning. The day feels established, its rhythm clear. You slow your pace slightly. There is something grounding about these small glimpses of life. The way learning begins, the way play fits into the edges of responsibility, the way attention moves between structure and freedom. You glance back once more. The square remains active, its movements continuing without pause. The children, the teacher, the watching figures at the edges, all of it forming a quiet, ongoing pattern. Then you turn forward again. The city stretches ahead, still unfolding, still offering new layers as you move through it, one step at a time. You leave the lively square behind, and the echo of laughter fades into something quieter, heavier. The air changes again, this time more noticeably. It carries a dampness that feels thicker, mixed with a sharper scent that lingers longer than the comforting smells of bread or wood smoke. The street narrows, but not in the familiar way. Here the space feels less cared for. The ground is uneven, darker in patches, where moisture has settled. You step carefully, your pace slowing as your senses adjust. A door stands open ahead, not inviting exactly, but not closed either. You glance inside as you pass, catching a glimpse of a dim interior where light struggles to reach the corners. A figure sits near the wall, wrapped in layers, their posture still. You continue walking. The sounds here are quieter but not peaceful. There is a low cough from somewhere unseen, followed by silence. A bucket is set down with a dull sound. Water splashes lightly, then stills. A commonly acknowledged reality of urban life in this period is that sanitation was limited and disease was a constant presence. As you move through this part of the city, that reality becomes something you can feel rather than simply understand. The canal nearby looks different. Its surface is darker, less reflective. Debris gathers along the edges, moving slowly with the current. The smell is stronger here, less balanced, more direct. You pause for a moment, not out of curiosity, but to adjust, to take in the change without turning away from it. There is a small unsettling detail that people do not always consider. Waste from households and workshops often found its way into the canals, creating conditions that could affect entire neighbourhoods. It was not a single event, but a continuous process shaping the environment day by day. You move on. A woman stands outside a doorway, holding a cloth to her face. Her expression is tired, her movements slower than those you have seen elsewhere. She glances at you briefly, then looks away, her attention returning to the space behind her. Inside you catch the faint outline of a bed. Someone lies there still, their presence felt more than seen. You do not linger. The street continues, and you follow it, your steps quieter now, more deliberate. A man passes you carrying a small bundle. He holds it carefully, almost protectively, his gaze fixed ahead. There is no exchange, no acknowledgement, only movement. You notice how different this feels from the market, from the workshops, from the docks. The rhythm here is slower, but not restful. It is shaped by limitation rather than choice. A careful examination of historical records suggests that illness was both common and poorly understood, leading to a wide range of remedies that blended observation, tradition and belief. As you walk, you begin to see traces of that. You pass a small table set near a doorway. On it, a collection of items rests, herbs dried and bundled, small containers, their contents unknown, a bowl of liquid that catches the light in a dull reflection. A woman tends to it. Her hands move with quiet focus, selecting one item, then another. She mixes them carefully, as if following a pattern learned through repetition rather than written instruction. You watch for a moment. There is a seriousness in her movements, a sense that what she is doing matters deeply, even if its outcome is uncertain. A discussion that remains unresolved among historians concerns how effective these remedies truly were. Some may have offered relief, others perhaps little more than comfort. Yet in a time with limited alternatives, they carried hope as much as function. You continue walking. The street bends slightly, and with it the atmosphere begins to shift again. The air feels less heavy, the smells less concentrated. The sounds of the wider city begin to return faint at first, then more clearly. You pass a doorway where a child sits quietly. They do not run or laugh as those in the square did. Instead, they watch the street with a stillness that feels older than their years. As you pass, they glance up, then back down, their attention returning inward. You move on. The contrast lingers. The city is not one thing. It is many layers existing side by side. Prosperity and hardship, movement and stillness, comfort and discomfort. You begin to feel the transition. The street widens slightly. The ground becomes more even, the air lighter. The change is gradual but noticeable. You take a slow breath. It feels easier here. You glance back once more. The darker stretch of street remains behind you, its presence still real, still part of the city's fabric. Then you turn forward. The day continues, and with it the shifting balance of everything you have seen so far, each layer adding to your understanding of this place. You step out of the heavier air and into a street that feels warmer, not just in temperature, but in tone. The light reflects more brightly here, catching on windows and door frames, and the sounds carry a softer edge. There is laughter again, but different from the open bursts of the square. This is lower, closer, shaped by conversation rather than play. A wooden sign hangs above a doorway. It sways slightly, creaking with a small familiar rhythm. The image painted on it has faded a little with time, but it still suggests what lies within. You do not need to read it. The sounds already tell you. You step inside. The air changes immediately. It is warmer, thicker, carrying the scent of ale wood and something cooked long enough to become rich and comforting. The light is dimmer, softened by smoke that lingers just below the ceiling. A well-established feature of urban life during this period is the central role of taverns as social spaces where people gather not only to drink, but to exchange news, negotiate, and unwind. Standing here, you feel that purpose settle around you. A group sits at a table near the centre of the room. Their conversation flows steadily, punctuated by small gestures, a nod, a brief laugh. One of them lifts a mug, takes a slow drink, then sets it down with a soft, deliberate sound. You move further in. The floor creaks under your weight, the wood responding with a quiet acknowledgement of your presence. A woman moves between the tables, carrying a tray with practiced ease. She places a drink down, collects an empty, and continues without pause. There is a small but telling detail that often goes unnoticed. Taverns are not always the chaotic, loud spaces people imagine. Many operate with a steady, controlled rhythm, especially during earlier hours, serving as places of routine rather than excess. You find a place near the wall. From here, you can observe without interrupting. The room holds a balance of motion and stillness. Some people speak, others listen, a few sit quietly, their attention turned inward. A man near the window leans back slightly. He speaks in a calm tone, his words measured as if he is explaining something rather than arguing. The others listen occasionally, responding, their voices overlapping gently. You do not hear every detail, but you sense the exchange of information. News from the docks, perhaps. Rumours from distant places. Small pieces of a larger world shared across a wooden table. A line of interpretation among scholars considers how information travelled in cities like this, often through informal networks rather than official channels. Taverns in this view become more than places of rest. They become nodes of communication where stories and updates move from one person to another. You watch as a man produces a small object from his pocket. He places it on the table and the others lean in slightly. Their expressions shift curiosity, replacing casual conversation. The object passes from hand to hand, each person examining it briefly before returning it. You wonder what it is. Something brought from elsewhere, perhaps. A token of a journey or a sample of a trade good. The moment passes. The object is returned, the conversation resumes, and the rhythm of the room continues. You take a slow breath. The air feels heavy, but not unpleasant. It carries warmth, familiarity, the sense of a place where people return again and again. A woman at another table laughs softly. The sound is brief, but it lingers, adding to the texture of the space. It is not loud enough to draw attention, only enough to be felt. You notice how time moves differently here. Outside, the day continues its steady progression. Here it feels slightly suspended, as if the pace has been gently lowered. A question that continues to invite discussion among historians concerns how inclusive these spaces truly were. Some accounts suggest a mix of social groups, while others point to subtle divisions based on trade status or familiarity. As you look around, you see hints of both. A variety of faces, yet also small clusters that seem to hold their own boundaries. You shift your weight slightly. The bench beneath you creaks in response. The sound blends into the room without drawing attention. The woman with the tray passes again. She pauses briefly at your side, as if acknowledging your presence, then moves on. Her path through the room is smooth, practiced, connecting each table in turn. You begin to feel the calm of it. The steady voices, the soft movements, the warmth of the space. It is not a place of urgency. It is a place of pause. You glance toward the doorway. Light from outside filters in, creating a subtle contrast with the dim interior. The world beyond continues, but here the focus remains inward. You stand slowly. The movement feels unhurried, natural. You take one last look around the room, letting the details settle in your memory. Then you step back outside. The air greets you again, lighter, carrying the broader sounds of the city. The transition is gentle but noticeable. You pause for a moment on the threshold. Behind you, the tavern continues its quiet rhythm. Ahead, the street stretches on, ready to draw you into the next layer of this unfolding day. And without hesitation, you move forward once more. You step back into the daylight and your eyes take a moment to adjust. The brightness feels softer now, no longer the pale uncertainty of morning, but a settled, steady glow that rests across the city. The street ahead carries a quieter kind of attention. Not the noise of trade, not the weight of labour, but something more focused, more observant. You notice it in the way people pause slightly longer at certain windows, in the way objects are arranged with care rather than urgency. You follow that subtle shift. A small shop appears along the street. its window clearer than most. Inside, objects are displayed in careful order. Prints, drawings, perhaps small painted panels. The light catches their surfaces, bringing out details that invite a closer look. You step nearer. A well-known feature of Amsterdam in this period is its flourishing art market, where paintings and prints were not limited to the wealthy elite, but available to a broader public. Standing here, you sense how that changes the relationship between people and images. You lean slightly toward the glass. The scene in one print shows a familiar canal, its water still, its buildings reflected with quiet precision. Another depicts a distant landscape, one you have not seen yet. It feels almost reachable through the image alone. There's a small but intriguing detail that often slips past notice. Many prints were produced in multiple copies, allowing images to circulate widely and become part of everyday life rather than rare possessions. You imagine how these scenes travel from one home to another, shaping how people see their own world. You step inside. The space is modest but thoughtfully arranged. The walls hold more images, some larger, others small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. A man stands near a table, examining a print with careful attention. He tilts it slightly. The light shifts across its surface, revealing details that were hidden before. He studies it for a moment longer, then sets it down gently. You move along the wall. Each image offers a different perspective. A portrait, its subject looking out with quiet intensity. A still life, objects arranged with deliberate care. A map, its lines tracing paths across unfamiliar seas. You feel the pull of observation. The way each piece asks you to look, to notice, to slow your gaze. A line of interpretation among historians considers how this widespread access to art influenced daily life, encouraging a culture of looking and reflecting that extended beyond formal settings. As you stand here, it feels true. These images are not distant. They are part of the rhythm of the city. You pause before a small painting. It shows an interior scene, a room not unlike the one you entered earlier in the day. A table, a window, a figure engaged in a quiet task. The light falls gently across the space, capturing a moment that feels both ordinary and deeply considered. You find yourself lingering. There is something calming about it. The way it holds stillness, the way it invites you to remain in that moment a little longer. You step back. The shop remains quiet, its atmosphere shaped by attention rather than movement. The man at the table selects another print, his focus steady. You turn toward the doorway. Outside, the street continues its sounds, softened by distance. You step out again, carrying with you the quiet impression of what you have seen. Further along, another window draws your eye. This one displays objects of a different kind. Curiosities, perhaps. Shells, small instruments, items that seem to have travelled far before arriving here. There is an interesting detail that often escapes casual notice. Collections of unusual objects, sometimes called cabinets of curiosity, were becoming popular during this period, reflecting a growing interest in the wider world and its many forms. You pause briefly. Each object feels like a fragment of something larger, a piece of a story that extends beyond the city. You continue walking. The street remains calm, yet full of subtle engagement. People stop, look, move on. Their attention shifts from one detail to another, never hurried, never fixed for too long. A question that continues to invite discussion among scholars concerns how these visual experiences shaped people's understanding of their place in the world. Some suggest that access to images expanded awareness, while others argue that interpretation remained closely tied to existing beliefs. As you move through this space, it feels like a quiet expansion, one that unfolds gradually. You slow your pace. The city reveals itself not only through action, but through observation, through moments where nothing happens except the act of looking. You glance back at the shop. Its window reflects the street, now blending the images inside with the movement outside. For a moment it is difficult to separate the two. Then you turn forward again. The light continues to guide you and the city continues to unfold, offering new ways of seeing with each step you take. You continue along the street and at first nothing seems to change. The same steady light, the same calm movement, the same quiet unfolding of the day. But then gradually something shifts. The air feels cooler, not sharply so, but enough that you notice it on your skin. A faint breeze moves along the canal, carrying a different kind of stillness. The sound softens slightly, as if the city itself is holding its breath. You pause near the water. The surface looks different now, less fluid, more subdued, as if it's beginning to settle into something more solid. You lean slightly, watching the way small ripples move more slowly than before. A widely accepted historical observation is that during colder months, Amsterdam's canals could freeze over, transforming the city's landscape in ways both practical and unexpected. As you stand here, you sense the beginning of that change. You take a slow breath. The air carries a crispness that was not present earlier. The familiar scents are still there, but quieter, less pronounced. A thin layer forms along the edges of the canal. It is subtle at first, almost easy to miss. A faint line where water meets cold air beginning to hold its shape. You watch as a small fragment of ice drifts slowly, then catches, then stills. There is a quiet transformation happening, one that does not rush, does not announce itself, but unfolds steadily. A small but curious detail that often surprises people is how quickly daily life adapted to these seasonal changes. Frozen canals could become pathways rather than barriers, opening new routes through the city. You step back from the edge. The ground beneath your feet feels firmer, the dampness reduced. The air brushes against your face, cooler now, carrying a sense of clarity. You continue walking. The streets feel different, less crowded, or perhaps simply quieter in their movement. People pass with slightly quicker steps, their bodies drawn inward against the cold. A woman pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her breath is faintly visible as she exhales, a small cloud that fades almost immediately. She moves with purpose, her steps measured but steady. You notice how the light changes. It becomes sharper, more defined. Shadows stretch longer edges, appearing clearer against the ground. You pass a small group gathered near the canal. They stand close together, looking out over the water. One of them gestures toward the forming ice, their hand moving slowly as if tracing its spread. There is a quiet anticipation in their posture, a sense that something familiar is returning. A line of inquiry among historians considers how these seasonal shifts influenced work and trade. Some suggest that frozen waterways could slow certain activities while enabling others, reshaping the rhythm of the city in subtle ways. As you observe the gathering, it feels like a moment of adjustment, of waiting to see how the change will settle. You continue forward. The sound of your footsteps becomes slightly sharper against the ground, the surface responding differently to your weight. The air feels cleaner, the earlier heaviness replaced by something lighter, more precise. You pass a window where frost has begun to form. It traces delicate patterns across the glass, catching the light in faint, intricate lines. Inside, a figure moves their outline, softened by the thin layer. You pause briefly. There is something calming about this shift. The way the city slows, the way details become more visible. You move on. Further along, the canal widens again, and the ice appears more clearly. Not yet solid across its entire surface, but spreading, connecting in patches that grow with each passing moment. A child stands near the edge. They look down at the ice with quiet curiosity, their posture still. For a moment they reach out with a stick touching the surface, lightly testing its strength. The sound is soft, a faint crack, not breaking but responding. You watch for a moment, then continue. The city feels different now, not asleep, not quiet, but shifted into a slower, more reflective rhythm. The movement remains, but it carries a different tone. You take a slow breath. The air fills your lungs more easily, the crispness settling into something steady. You glance back. The canal you passed now holds a thin, shimmering layer, reflecting the pale light in a new way. Then you turn forward again. The day continues, shaped now by the season, by the quiet transformation that has begun to take hold, guiding the city into its next phase. You move on from the cooling canals, and the brightness of the air seems to soften again, as if the city is gently guiding you toward something less visible. The streets narrow once more, though not in the familiar way of homes and quiet lanes. Here the feeling is different, more restrained, more watchful. The sounds are quieter, not empty, but subdued. Conversations are shorter footsteps, slower movements, more contained. You sense a shift, not just in space, but in mood. A doorway stands ahead, larger than the others, its surface plain but solid. You approach without urgency. There is no sign drawing attention to it yet. Its presence feels purposeful. A few people stand nearby, waiting. Their posture is calm, but there is a stillness to it that feels heavier than the relaxed pauses you have seen elsewhere. You step closer. The door opens briefly, just enough to allow someone to pass through. You catch a glimpse of the interior, a wide room simple in its arrangement, rows of benches, a sense of order but not comfort. Then the door closes again. A widely recognised feature of Amsterdam's civic life during this period is the existence of charitable institutions such as poorhouses and almshouses, designed to support those who could not support themselves. As you stand here, the idea becomes something tangible, something you can feel in the quiet gravity of the place. You remain still for a moment. The people waiting do not speak much. When they do, their voices are low, their words brief. There is no urgency, but also no ease. A small but telling detail that often escapes casual notice is how structured these systems of charity were. Assistance was given, but often within strict rules, shaped by expectations of behaviour, work and discipline. You watch as the door opens again. Another person enters their steps, measured, their gaze lowered. The transition from outside to inside is quick, almost seamless, yet it feels significant. You do not follow. Instead, you step back slightly, allowing the moment to remain at a distance. A thoughtful examination of historical accounts suggests that cities like Amsterdam balanced wealth and poverty in ways that were both practical and uneasy. Prosperity created opportunity, but it also required systems to manage those who fell outside its reach. Standing here, that balance feels real, present in the quiet space between movement and stillness. You continue walking. The street beyond the building carries a similar tone. Not empty, but less animated. People move with purpose, yet without the visible energy of trade or work. You pass a figure seated against a wall. Their clothing is worn, their posture still. They do not call out, do not reach for attention. They simply remain part of the street in a way that is easy to overlook. You slow your pace. There is a subtle discomfort here, not overwhelming, but present. A reminder that the city you have been walking through is not uniform in its experience. A question that remains under discussion among historians concerns how visible poverty truly was in daily life. Some sources suggest it was carefully managed and contained, while others indicate it was an unavoidable part of the urban landscape. As you move through this street, it feels both present and partially hidden, existing in spaces that are not always at the centre of attention. You continue on. The air feels stiller, the sounds softer. Even the light seems to rest more gently on the surfaces around you, as if the city itself is aware of this quieter layer. You pass another doorway, this one smaller, less formal, yet carrying a similar sense of restraint. A faint sound comes from within. Not conversation, not quite movement. Something in between. You do not stop. Instead, you let your steps carry you forward, allowing the space to remain as it is without pressing into it. A cart moves slowly along the street. Its wheels produce a low, steady sound that feels almost out of place in the quiet. The driver guides it carefully, his attention fixed ahead. You step aside. As it passes, you notice the contents. Simple items, nothing extravagant, the kind of goods that sustain rather than display. You continue walking. Gradually, the atmosphere begins to shift again. The streets widen slightly, the sounds begin to return, the movement grows more varied. You take a slow breath. The change is subtle, but it brings a sense of release. You glance back once more. The quieter street remains behind you, holding its stillness, its careful balance between need and support. Then you turn forward. The city continues to unfold, and with it the understanding that beneath its visible success lies a more complex, more layered reality, one that moves just as steadily even when it is not always seen. You move away from the quiet restraint of that street, and the city begins to open again, though in a different way than before. The space ahead feels deliberate, arranged with intention rather than grown through habit. The buildings rise larger here. Their facades are more symmetrical, their windows evenly spaced, their surfaces cleaner and more carefully maintained. The ground beneath your feet feels smoother, as if this part of the city has been shaped with a different level of attention. You slow your pace. There is a sense of formality here, not in the way of ceremony, but in the way everything aligns. The lines of the buildings, the width of the street, the spacing of doors and windows. It all feels measured. You approach a broad open space. At its centre stands a large building, its presence steady and unmistakable. It does not reach upward in the same narrow way as the houses you have seen. Instead, it spreads outward, grounded, balanced. A well-established historical understanding is that Amsterdam's civic institutions were managed by a group of regents, wealthy and influential citizens who oversaw governance within the Republic. This building, you sense, is one of the places where that governance takes shape. You move closer. The entrance is wide, framed by stone that has been shaped with care. People pass in and out, their movements calm, their expressions composed. You step inside. The space is open, the ceiling higher than anything you have seen so far. Light enters through tall windows, illuminating the interior in a way that feels both clear and controlled. The sound changes. Footsteps echo softly, each one carrying just a little further than expected. Voices are present, but quieter, measured, as if shaped by the space itself. A man stands near a long table. He holds a document speaking to another who listens with careful attention. Their exchange is calm, deliberate, each word placed with intention. You walk slowly across the room. The floor beneath you is smooth, the surface reflecting the light in subtle ways. You notice how the space encourages a certain kind of movement. Not hurried, not casual, but steady and composed. There is an interesting detail that often goes unnoticed. Buildings like this were designed not only for function, but to convey a sense of order and stability. The architecture itself becomes part of how authority is expressed. You pause near a wall. A large map hangs there, more detailed than those you saw earlier. Lines stretch across it, connecting places you recognise with others that feel distant and abstract. You study it for a moment. The connections it shows are not just geographical. They represent decisions, agreements, systems that extend far beyond this room. You turn back toward the centre. More people move through the space now. Some carry papers, others speak in low tones, their conversations brief but purposeful. A perspective often discussed in historical studies considers how governance in Amsterdam relied on a balance between civic responsibility and private interest. Those who held power were also deeply involved in trade and commerce. As you observe the room, you sense that overlap. The decisions made here are not separate from the life of the city, they are woven into it. You continue walking. A doorway leads into another room, smaller but equally ordered. Inside, a group sits around a table, their attention focused inward. One of them gestures toward a document and the others lean in slightly. You remain at the threshold. There is no need to enter. The purpose of the space is clear enough from here. You step back. The larger hall holds your attention again. The movement, the light, the quiet structure of it all. You begin to notice something. Even in this place of authority, the pace remains steady. There is no sense of urgency, no raised voices. Decisions unfold through conversation, through consideration, through time. A question that continues to interest historians concerns how inclusive this system of governance truly was. While it presented itself as a republic, power often remained concentrated among a relatively small group. As you stand here, you can feel both the openness of the space and the quiet boundaries that shape it. You take a slow breath. The air feels clear, the atmosphere balanced. You turn toward the entrance. The street outside waits, carrying the familiar sounds of the city. As you step back through the doorway, the light shifts again, softer, more varied. You pause just outside. Looking back, the building stands as it did before, steady, composed, holding its quiet authority. Then you turn forward. The city continues, and you follow, moving from the spaces of decision back into the flowing rhythm of everyday life. You step away from the ordered calm of the civic building, and the street greets you with a softer light. The day has begun to lean toward evening, though not fully. The brightness has mellowed edges, less sharp shadows stretching longer across the ground. You notice the change almost immediately. The sounds shift first, conversations lower in tone, footsteps slow slightly. The steady motion of the day begins to ease into something quieter, more reflective. You follow the street as it curves back toward the canals. The water catches the fading light, reflecting it in long, broken lines. The surface moves gently, less disturbed now, as if the city itself is settling. A commonly recognised aspect of urban life in this period is the presence of night watchmen tasked with maintaining order after dark in cities that relied on human vigilance rather than modern lighting or policing. As the light continues to fade, you begin to sense their presence. A figure appears at the far end of the street. He carries a lantern, its glow small but steady. The light sways slightly with each step, casting moving shadows along the walls. You slow your pace. There is something calming about the rhythm of his movement. Not hurried, not idle, simply steady. You move closer to the canal. The air feels cooler again, the dampness returning, though softened by the evening. A faint mist begins to form near the water, rising just enough to blur the edges of reflections. You lean slightly on the railing. The wood feels cool beneath your hand, its surface worn smooth by years of contact. Below the water holds the fading sky, its colours shifting gradually. A second figure appears further along the canal. He carries a similar lantern, his path crossing briefly with the first. They exchange a short nod, a moment of recognition, then continue in opposite directions. There is a small but intriguing detail that often escapes notice. Watchmen were not only responsible for security, but also for marking the passage of time, calling out the hours as they moved through the streets. Their voices, when raised, would carry across the quiet city. You listen. For a moment, there is only the soft sound of water and distant footsteps. Then faintly a voice, not loud but clear enough to be heard, marking time in a way that feels both practical and strangely comforting. You continue walking. The streets grow darker as you move away from the last of the daylight. Windows begin to glow softly, candles lit within their light spilling out in small warm patches. You pass a doorway where a family gathers inside. The scene is brief, a glimpse through glass. A table, a candle, figures seated close together. The moment feels contained, private, yet connected to the larger rhythm of the city. A line of scholarly interpretation considers how nighttime in early modern cities balanced fear and familiarity. Without modern lighting, darkness could obscure and unsettle, yet routine and shared presence often soften that uncertainty. As you walk, it feels like both are present. The shadows deepen, yet the steady movement of people and light keeps them from becoming overwhelming. You continue along the canal. The mist thickens slightly, softening the outlines of buildings and boats. The world becomes quieter, each sound more distinct against the background of stillness. A boat moves slowly through the water. Its motion is almost silent, the gentle push of its passage barely disturbing the surface. A lantern hangs at its front, its reflection stretching and breaking with each ripple. You watch as it passes. The light drifts with it, then fades as it moves further away. You take a slow breath. The air feels cooler now, settling into the calm of evening. The earlier activity of the day has not disappeared, but it has shifted into a quieter form. A question that continues to engage historians concerns how safe cities like Amsterdam truly were at night. Some accounts describe strict systems of order, while others suggest moments of unpredictability. As you walk, the presence of the watchman and the steady glow of lanterns create a sense of reassurance, even as the darkness deepens. You slow your pace. There is no need to hurry. The city has entered a different rhythm now, one that invites a slower, more attentive movement. You glance back along the canal. The figures of the watchmen are further away now, their lanterns small points of light against the growing dark. Then you turn forward. The path continues, leading you deeper into the evening, where the city holds its breath in a quiet balance between rest and watchfulness. You continue along the dim canal, and the city grows quieter still. The movement of the watchmen fades behind you, their lanterns, now only distant glimmers. Ahead, the streets narrow once more, guiding you back toward the intimate spaces hidden behind those tall, slender facades. The light shifts again. Not gone, but softened into small, contained sources. Windows glow gently, each one holding a separate world. The street itself is darker, yet not empty. It feels held together by these scattered points of warmth. You slow your steps. There is a natural pull toward those windows, toward the quiet lives unfolding just beyond the glass. You pause beside one. Inside, a candle rests at the centre of a table. Its flame moves slightly, responding to the faint currents of air. Around it, a small group sits close together. Their voices are low, their gestures unhurried. A broadly accepted understanding of domestic life in this period highlights how evenings were often spent indoors, gathered around limited sources of light and heat. As you stand here, you can see how that shapes the atmosphere. Everything draws inward, closer, quieter. You move on. Another window reveals a different scene. A bed enclosed by curtains, the fabric drawn partially closed. The space feels private, protected. A figure moves within, adjusting the coverings, preparing for rest. There is a subtle but fascinating detail that people sometimes overlook. Beds in this period were often shared and enclosed with curtains to conserve warmth, creating a small contained environment within the larger room. You imagine how that changes the experience of sleep, turning it into something more sheltered. You continue walking. The street is calm, your footsteps soft against the ground. The sounds are minimal now, a distant door closing, the faint creak of wood settling, the quiet murmur of voices carried just far enough to remind you that life continues behind each wall. You pass a doorway slightly ajar. Light spills out onto the street, warmer than the cool air around you. You pause just long enough to glimpse inside. A woman stands near the hearth, her movements slow, deliberate. She arranges a few items, then pauses, as if checking that everything is in its place before the night deepens. You step back. It feels like a moment not meant to be disturbed. A perspective explored by historians considers how the design of these narrow homes shaped family life, compressing multiple functions into limited space while encouraging closeness. As you move through this street, that closeness feels tangible, present in every small detail. You continue forward. The buildings lean slightly above you, their upper levels almost reaching toward each other. The sky is only a thin strip, now darkening gradually. A question that remains open to interpretation concerns how people experienced privacy in such close quarters. Some accounts suggest that boundaries were fluid, while others point to careful practices that created a sense of separation within shared spaces. As you walk, you sense that balance again, openness and enclosure existing together. You pause once more. A window above you is open just a little. You hear a voice soft speaking in a tone that suggests the end of a conversation rather than the beginning. Another voice responds even quieter. Then silence returns. You take a slow breath. The air feels still settled into the calm of night. The earlier layers of the day have folded into this quieter form, each one still present but softened. You continue walking. The street begins to curve, leading you back toward a familiar pattern. The canal is not far. You can sense it in the slight change in air, the faint reflection of light. You reach the edge once more. The water is darker now, reflecting only the small points of light from windows and lanterns. The surface moves gently, its rhythm slower, more subdued. You rest your hand on the railing. The wood feels cooler than before the night settling into it. You glance back. The narrow street you just walked remains quiet, its windows glowing softly, its doors closed, its life contained within. Then you turn forward. The city rests not fully asleep, but close to it, and you move with it into the final stretch of this quiet, unfolding night. You remain by the canal, your hand resting lightly on the cool wood as the city settles into its final quiet hours. The movement that filled the day has thinned to almost nothing now. What remains is softer, slower, like a steady breath drawn out over time. The water holds the night. It reflects the scattered lights from windows and distant lanterns, stretching them into long, wavering lines. Each ripple gently reshapes the image, never fully still yet, never hurried. You begin to walk again. Your steps are quieter than before, not because the ground has changed, but because the world around you has. There is less to compete with, fewer sounds to overlap. Each movement feels more noticeable, yet also more contained. A widely acknowledged feature of early modern cities is that night brought a different kind of awareness, where darkness altered perception and routine. As you move through these final hours, you feel that shift fully. The familiar streets seem slightly unfamiliar, their details soften their edges, less defined. You follow the curve of the canal. The buildings stand as they did before, tall and narrow, their upper levels fading into shadow. Some windows remain lit, though fewer now. Others have gone dark, their interiors settled into rest. A faint sound reaches you, not from nearby, but carried across distance. A door closing somewhere along the water. The soft echo lingers, then fades. There is a small, almost unnoticed detail that often slips by. In the absence of constant noise, even the simplest sounds take on a presence of their own, shaping the atmosphere in subtle ways. You begin to hear the city differently now, not as a blend, but as individual moments. You slow your pace. There is no destination waiting, no task to complete. Only the quiet unfolding of the night. You pass a boat tied gently along the edge. It moves slightly with the water, the rope holding it in place. The motion is soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. A lantern rests near its centre, its light dim but steady. You pause for a moment. The reflection of that lantern stretches across the surface, then breaks, then reforms again. It feels like watching something that has no need to change, yet never remains the same. A reflective thread in historical writing considers how people in this period experienced the passage of time without the constant presence of mechanical clocks in everyday life. Instead, time was often marked by light, by sound, by routine. Standing here, you sense that kind of time. Slow, continuous, unforced. You continue walking. The mist has settled slightly, hovering just above the water, softening the distance. The far end of the canal fades into it, leaving only hints of shape and light. You take a slow breath. The air is cooler now, but not sharp. It rests gently, filling your lungs without effort. A question that continues to invite reflection among historians concerns how people found moments of stillness within lives shaped by work and uncertainty. Some suggest that such quiet was rare, while others point to these in-between hours as spaces of calm. As you move through this final stretch of night, it feels like a pause that belongs to everyone, even if only briefly. You reach a familiar bridge. You step onto it slowly, your hand brushing the railing as you move to the centre. From here, you can see the canal stretching in both directions, its surface holding the night in quiet balance. You stop. The city surrounds you, yet feels distant. Each building, each window, each small point of light becomes part of a larger stillness. You think back, the narrow streets of the morning, the markets, the docks, the counting rooms, the workshops, the hidden gatherings, the quieter corners of hardship, the voices, the movement, the layered rhythm of the day. All of it has settled now. Not gone, but resting. You remain there for a moment longer. The water moves gently beneath you. The light shifts slightly. The air carries only the faintest sounds. Then slowly you step off the bridge. The street on the other side is even quieter, its windows mostly dark. The ground feels familiar beneath your feet, the rhythm of your steps steady. You continue walking. There is no urgency now, only a gradual winding down, as if the city itself is preparing to begin again. The sky above you begins to lighten just slightly. Not enough to call it dawn, but enough to suggest that it is approaching. A subtle shift, barely noticeable yet certain. You take one last look at the canal. It holds the final moments of night steady and calm, and then gently you let your pace slow even further. The city breathes around you, soft and quiet, its many layers resting together. The day you have walked through settles into memory, its details blending into something calm and continuous. You feel that calm settle as well. Nothing pressing, nothing urgent, only the quiet awareness of having moved through a place that holds both motion and stillness in equal measure. And as the first hint of morning begins to return, you allow yourself to rest within that gentle transition where night fades and the city prepares once again to wake. Now everything softens. The edges of the buildings blur slightly. The reflections in the canal stretch and merge, and the small remaining lights dim in your awareness. Your steps slow until they are almost effortless, as if the ground itself is guiding you forward without resistance. The air feels lighter now, smoother, carrying only the faintest traces of the city you have just moved through. The sounds fade into a distant hush, like a memory already beginning to drift. You no longer need to look closely. The details are still there, but they rest gently, no longer asking for your attention. The narrow houses, the quiet water, the soft glow of windows, all settle into a calm, steady presence. You breathe slowly, in and out. Each breath feels a little deeper, a little easier. The canal beside you becomes a single smooth surface, its motion barely noticeable. The sky above softens into a pale, quiet expanse, holding the first suggestion of light without urgency. Nothing needs to happen now. The city continues, but you can let it move on its own. Your steps grow lighter, quieter, until you almost forget them entirely. There is only the feeling of being here in this gentle space between night and morning, where everything rests and nothing demands. You let that feeling stay, just for a moment longer, and then a little longer still. Sweet dreams.